This is the first in the Maple Hill and the competitive being hosted. Next was a book that I read for Buzzwordathon being hosted by Drama Queenathon. Next was a book that I read. Hello people, this is Sonali, the Melodramatic Bookworm. If you've been here before, welcome back, and if you're new to my channel, welcome to the Melodramatic Bookworm family. Also welcome to my February 2024 reading wrap-up. I missed out on making a full video for my January reading. I actually made a short instead, but I'm very determined to get back to making full videos for wrap-ups from February onwards. I read 20 books in February. Yeah, I know, I'm shocked as well, but I did end up finding a few favorites, so that's saying something. It was, however, a very uneven reading month because 14 of these 20 books I read in the first 2 weeks and only 6 of these books I read in the last 15 days. And I'm also in the middle of 3 books right now. One I just finished reading just before filming this video, which was Ace of Spades. But 2 of them I started in February and one I'm continuing from January, which I paused because of that romance reading vlog that I did. And speaking of the romance reading vlog, since I've spoken about the first 14 books in this video that I'll be mentioning here, I've spoken about them in detail in that vlog. I won't be going into much detail over here. I'll just be mentioning it quickly and moving on to the next one. So without any further ado, let's dive right into my February 2024 reading wrap up, and let me share with you all the books that I read in February 2024 and their reviews. So as I mentioned before, the first 14 books that I read in February were for the romance reading vlog that went up on Valentine's Day. I have full detailed reviews of these first 14 books in that video, so I'd highly recommend that you go check that out. Link will be here as well as in the description box below. So let's quickly breeze through these 14 books before I get on to the next set of books that I've read. First up was I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. It was a pretty disappointing read for me, but my problems with the book stem not from the story but from its structure. Next was The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. This is classic Christina Lauren, and although this isn't my favorite of their work, I did really like it a lot. Next was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is another author I have read and loved before, but this was a really frustrating read because of the misunderstanding trope. But it's still funny to a large extent. Next up was a book that became an instant favorite, and that was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This is the first in the Maple Hill series, and it is steamy, it is laugh out loud hilarious, it's well paced and with some great writing. I loved everything about this book, and it might seem like there is no plot, there is no point what even is happening types, but that didn't matter to me in the end. And then came Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This is a book about chess and the competitive spirit and familial responsibility and falling in love. I mean, it was sweet, it was funny, it was quick, and I loved it. Oof. Next was The Fine Print, the first in the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher, and this was about a rich, grumpy a-hole who meets a nowhere near that rich, sunshine, laugher, whose sole aim in life is to turn the said a-hole into a decent human being. It was like, And then The Lover by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and this is a typical Silvia Moreno Garcia offering where it's creepy, it's lovely, it's quick, and it has an ending that you won't see coming. And you can finish it in under an hour too. Next was Wildfire, the second in the Maple Hill series by Hannah Grace, and this was almost as funny as Icebreaker, but it was equally steamy. Hannah Grace has this knack where she writes really communicative characters. She knows how to write them, and I absolutely love her for it. Then came Rosie and the Dreamboat by Sally Thorne. It has the strangest meet cute. It is after all part of the improbable meet cute series, but this meet cute will warm your heart like no other. Read it. And then in the same series, the Improbable Meet Cute series, came The Exception to the Rule by Christina Lauren, and this is a novella about two people who connect via an accidental email and who end up with a tradition that slowly over the years chips away and breaks all the rules. I absolutely loved it. This is also one that I highly recommend. It is also quick. Oh good lord. Okay, and then I read Terms and Conditions, the second in the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher, and I don't even want to talk about this book. This was like... But let me say this. A-hole men getting away with being a-hole men until the last few pages or so isn't really a character arc. And then I read a graphic novel called Stage Dreams by Melanie Gilman, and this is set in 1860s New Mexico territory, in which we follow a Latinx outlaw and a trans woman who are trying to foil a Confederate plot. It is short, it is sweet, it is thrilling, it's queer, and I loved it. Then came Drop, Cover and Hold On by Jasmine Guillory. This is also part of the Improbable Meet Cute series, but this one was a meh read for me. Like, the writing was contrived, the meet cute was okay, but everything felt really rushed after that, and somehow the whole thing didn't work for me. I'll still try this author's other books though. And my last read for this vlog was Worst Wingman Ever by Abby Jimenez. This is also part of the Improbable Meet Cute series. Yeah, I know I kept getting pulled back into this series because the stories were so addictive, but this book I really enjoyed, especially because of the amount of detail that the author has packed into this little book. This book is about two people who, due to circumstances and various reasons, seem like ships crossing in the night, but then they form a bond, a connection somehow, and that leaves them wistful. I really enjoyed this one. I would highly recommend it. So those were the books that I read for the romance reading vlog. Again, if you'd like to go watch that video, if you'd like to go check that out, link will be in the description box below. I'd highly recommend that you do, because the reviews for these books are much more detailed in that video there. So going by that pace, I thought I'd read at least 7 or 8 more books in the last 15 days, but I ended up reading about 6 more books. So this next book I started towards the end of January, but I wasn't able to finish it in Jan, and then I had to put it on hold because I was starting the said vlog, the romance reading vlog, in February. But once I was done with that vlog, I picked this up immediately after, and it was the first book I finished after that. And the book in question is Heroes by Stephen Fry. This is the second in the Mythos trilogy by Stephen Fry, the first being Mythos and the third being Troy. In this trilogy, Stephen Fry takes us through Greek mythology, the myths, the stories, the legends, from where so many modern things, terms and concepts stem from. And in Mythos, he started off from the very beginning, where everything kicked off from, like the titans, the gods, and everything in between. In this book, however, in Heroes, he takes the spotlight onto the heroes, the demigods, the powerful ones who were chosen by gods and kings to go on quests on their behalf, maybe to prove a point. We read about heroes like Heracles, like Jason, Orpheus, and Atalanta, their lives, their labors, what they are known for, right up to their deaths, or to them gaining immortality. Because, you know, the gods are proud and they can do whatever they like, including smite a town because they didn't pay them tribute. We know that Stephen Fry has a witty manner about him, and that witty manner comes out in full force in this book. He takes us through these hero stories with accompanied by a very fun commentary and putting in disclaimers from time to time saying that, look, the gods were like this, we know the gods were like this is not me being sexist. And I'm like, I know, Mr. Fry, I know. But I love this book and I would highly recommend this series, so far at least. And if you're looking for books on Greek mythology and everything it encompasses, then this is the perfect one for you. My next read was a book that I said that I would read for that romance reading vlog, but I ended up reading it a bit after because I needed a break from that Grum/Sunshine thing going on over there. And that book was Final Offer, the last in the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher. Although I must say that this book isn't as bad as the first 2 books in this series, but this is the story of the middle Kane brother, Callahan or Cal, who is an alcoholic. He deals with his issues by drowning in a bottle of alcohol, and he has a shipload of issues. But being the rich guy that he is, he can afford not to work at all. But Grandpa Kane has left that last thing, no, for each of these brothers. He has made a stipulation that if he wants to keep his inheritance, he needs to complete a task, and that task is to sell the Lake Wisteria house that Cal grew up in. So Cal ends up in Lake Wisteria, but he comes face to face with his first love, the one woman he walked out on all those years ago. And the curveball here is that Grandpa Kane has made it such that Cal and Alana now co-own the house, and Cal now has to live there for 3 months. Oh, and he cannot sell the house without Alana's approval, because Alana now co-owns the house. But Alana now has a daughter, and her only concern is having stability for that kid. And apart from the shock that Cal receives on seeing that Alana has a kid, how they both will cope and whether or not Cal and Alana can stay away from each other the second time around forms this entire story. This is probably a better executed arc than the first 2 books, because there's nobody in this book saying things in a temper or just for the heck of it, just to create drama. It talks about problems like alcoholism and how it can affect your relationships once it gets its claws in you. Cal and Alana's back and forth and them fighting their very obvious attraction that's threatening to bloom all over again is very entertaining to watch, because this time it feels like it is a sort of forbidden thing because of their own fears of getting hurt all over again. But I felt like it was way too long and roundabout and repetitive just for the heck of it. It didn't need to be 500 plus pages. But I do like how strong-willed of a character Alana is and how she puts her foot down when Cal crosses the line. And this seems to be a sort of a theme for the female protagonists in this series, which is good in its own way. But other than that, there was no redemptive quality to the story as such, and I found myself thinking multiple times throughout the book, why isn't this over yet? I then moved on to a book by one of my new favorite people on the planet, Trevor Noah, and I read his memoir, Born a Crime. I've been watching Trevor Noah's comedy specials on Netflix, and I love how well-rounded they are. Like, his comedy is hilarious, but it's also kind, while pointing out the centuries of racism and colonization with some of the best rejoinders ever. He has a way to him that's like unparalleled. I knew some of the bits and pieces from his comedy specials through reels and video snippets that I watched, but actually watching his comedy specials has unearthed a different level of respect for him. So obviously, after watching his comedy specials and after learning the kind of person that he is, I thought that it was finally time for me to read his memoir, Born a Crime. Born a Crime is like watching one of Trevor Noah's comedy specials. It has heart, it has heartbreak, it has truth, all of it in a witty narrative that will pull you in and it will keep you there. And especially because of the way he talks about his mother, it's so heartwarming to see. The love, the admiration, the understanding, the adoration that he has for her. Oh, it was so lovely. But wait until he talks about the ass whooping she gave him, and it turns into the funniest thing ever. But that's the fun part. Trevor Noah also talks about apartheid and the things that happened in South African society during it and after it ended. And he doesn't just tell us, he shows us. He gives us snippets of South African history and its peoples. And I've learned so much about the history of that country just through reading these snippets. I can't even begin to explain. Trevor Noah's mother is black and his father is white. He's Swiss, and he tells us about how it was illegal for black and white people to mate at the time, which is why his book, his memoir, is titled Born a Crime. He tells us about his growing years, everything he had to endure, his mother's marriage to an abusive man who would end up putting a bullet in her head, and Trevor Noah tells it to us in a detached but affected manner. Born a Crime is one of the best memoirs out there, and I don't just mean that in a this was written by one of my favorite comics kind of way. I mean that in the way that it is extremely well written, ebbing and flowing perfectly as needed, and inserting factoids as and when needed. And I learned more about South African history from his memoir than ever before, so that's saying something. So yes, Born a Crime has become one of my favorite books of 2024 and one of my favorite non-fiction books of all time. Highly recommend. Next was a book that I read for Buzzwordathon being hosted by Books and Lala, and the prompt for February was to read a book that has a title with a happy word in it. And the book that I picked for this was one that I'm still so frustrated about because I didn't ended up not loving it, especially when it has such a fantastic premise. And that book is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. Oh my god. But just to clarify, I didn't hate this book. I just think that the main character was over the top unbearable. The way the book made its point was also just way too roundabout for my liking. But I'm getting ahead of myself. An Absolutely Remarkable Thing is about April May, who is a graphics designer living in New York and who is on her way home from work one night, but that night she finds a seemingly very interesting kind of art installation. It seems like a robot of some kind. She is fascinated by it and wanting the world to see it and wanting to be the one to show it to the world. She calls her podcaster friend and asks him to bring his video equipment with him. They film a video calling it Carl and they upload it to YouTube, and by the time she wakes up the following morning, it has gone nuts viral. Now news trickles in that there are several Carls in different cities across the world that they have just sprung up out of nowhere, and since April May was the first person to actually document it, she is thrust into the spotlight. And how April May handles her fame in her ambition to make a mark on the world and how her relationships suffer forms this entire story. And oh my god, I must say this right off the bat that April May is as insufferable as they come. But that's the thing, she is very aware that she is insufferable, that she is making questionable decisions in the moment, and that in that particular moment she didn't know better. I mean, it does make it a little better, the story a little better, but not completely. What I really liked about this book is that Hank Green, who is someone who has seen a lot of internet fame, talks about how that very fame can go two ways. You can either let it get to your head, or you can take advantage of it and do the right thing. It is very thought-provoking, but then the way that it goes about doing this job is very roundabout and confusing. In the sense that there are places in the book where a particular character behaves or says something that insinuates that the reader is supposed to know what's happening behind the scenes over there. But when you go back and look at it, you literally go like a few pages behind and you see whether you've missed something. There's nothing over there. There's nothing that made it clear. And yes, I get it. I get that it's supposed to do exactly that, to provoke thought, to make you think, to make you, introspect. But it felt to me like I was being preached to in a way that made me feel dumb. Like someone was looking me up and down in a very disapproving manner and saying, you should know better. But how will I know what you're trying to say? You're the author. You made up this world. Don't make me do the work, you tell me. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of April May, every time her friends looked at her like she was being dumb, like she was doing something wrong without actually telling her what they think outright, it just made me want to scream. Because come on, yeah. I mean, she's annoying on a whole other level, because even if they did say something to her, even if they tried to give her advice, she wouldn't listen to them, she wouldn't take their advice. She would do whatever the hell she wanted to do, but come on. So even though it's an okay book, and I even loved the premise of the story about social media fame, its fickleness, how it can be either destructive or constructive depending on how you see it, the structuring of the book itself I wasn't a huge fan of. And after that disappointing experience, I moved on to my first manga ever, and that was volumes 1, 2 and 3 of Full Metal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. And what an experience this was. This is the story of the Elric brothers, two Elric brothers, Edward and Alphonse, who are alchemists. Both are teenagers, but given what they have gone through and everything that they have achieved, they are esteemed and feared alchemists across the land. But just for the backstory, in a ritual, they attempted to bring their dead mother back, but Alphonse lost his life and Edward lost an arm. But to bring his brother back to life, Edward gave up a leg as well. And because of that, Edward was able to infuse Alphonse's soul into a suit of armor. And they are now roaming the lands looking for the one thing that will restore their bodies to their original states. which is the Philosopher's Stone. And in their travels, they meet different people, ranging from people who need their help to merciless enemies who will stop at nothing to get the famed Elric brothers out of the way. And you might think that given a subject such as this, that the book would be a somber journey of sorts. And while that is true for part of the story, because the themes there are loss, grief, and soul searching, the other half is like absolutely very adorably hilarious. Like, I can't tell you the number of times I burst out laughing and my husband looked at me like, what is this woman up to? And this is especially noteworthy because once it turns onto somber lane, it becomes so intense and introspective that you can't help but wonder, like I did, where has this been all my life? Because when a story asks you about humanity and the lengths that humans will go to for power and the moral implications of it all, you stop and think. And that's why I love Full Metal Alchemist like I do, and I love that this is my first manga ever. Thank you to the people who plugged this so hard for me. I am forever indebted to you. I ended February with a gut-wrenching read, and that book was A Woman Is No Man by Eta Froom. This is a book by a Palestinian-American novelist, and it follows the lives of two women, a mother and daughter, 18 years apart. One timeline starts in 1990, where 18-year-old Isra is left with no choice but to marry Adam and move to America. And we follow her life as she adjusts to a brand new life in a brand new country, but one that is not that different from her life back in Palestine. Another timeline follows 18-year-old Dea, who is Isra's daughter, in 2008 and who is being forced by her grandmother, her father's mother, Farida, to meet with suitors because she says that that is the duty of a woman. And Dea doesn't agree that this is the only way forward for her, but there seems to be no other in sight. She and her sisters have been told that her parents died in a car crash, but when someone from their past comes knocking, Dea begins to see her life and her mother's and her community as a whole in a completely different light. What is this truth that's about to change Dea's whole life forms this entire story. This was a book that I had to put down time and time again because of the fury raging in my veins as I read about the misogyny towards the women dictated by tradition and coupled by the barbarism that is the occupation and the genocide of the Palestinian lands, of the Palestinian people. Farida is my least favorite character from this book, and maybe it's because that she is one of the common threads that's connecting Isra and Dea's destinies. And in her character, we see patriarchal conditioning and how going through something will mean that that person will pass it on to someone else in the name of tradition, and they will take it for granted and they will not even think about breaking the cycle. They will not say that I went through this, I don't want you to go through this either because I know how painful it is. No, I went through this, so you have to go through it too. Why should I be the only one in pain? We see how daughters are looked down upon in so many cultures and sons are seen as something to aspire to, and this difference is something that is so very dumb in my opinion. We see how it is seen as okay in many cultures that the man of the house raises his hand against a woman, that it is seen as normal, that it must be the woman's fault because why would a man do that otherwise? She deserved it. We see how a woman is confined to certain rules like cooking, cleaning, motherhood, being a dutiful wife. And she isn't supposed to raise her voice or question her husband or go out alone or talk to another man no matter how innocent that is, or to aspire to study, because what use is a degree when your duty is to your husband, to your house, to your cooking, to your children. A woman must bear children as soon as she is married because otherwise of what use is she? And God forbid she bears a girl child. Toba toba, she'll have to live in disgrace for the rest of eternity. And if she bears 4 girl children like Isra did, she's done for, she's gone. Boy, oh boy, I am so enraged at the end of this book. Even like almost a week after having finished this, I'm like, I loved Sarah though because I feel like her character arc was the best among all of the characters and she somehow became the voice of reason, which I appreciated a lot. The only downside is that sometimes she began spouting things and rules and talks like she was a self-help book or something. And this book basically talks about holding fate in our own hands and deciding what to do with it, which is an admirable thing in itself and I really admire it for it. But I felt like the ending was a little too rushed and a little too abrupt because characters like Farida, and I have seen a couple of characters like her, they don't do things like that. Okay, so my camera's battery gave up on me. It just up and died, so I'm filming this last clip on my phone. But what I was saying before I was so rudely cut off by the camera was the fact that A Woman Is No Man is a book where we see Palestinian culture, about things that resonate with us, especially because us as Indians have so much in common with Palestinian culture. The food, the tea, the treatment of women, and don't even start with me. I can give you many examples and so much more. Read this book and I promise you that it will leave you a much different person than it found you. So those were all the books that I read in February 2024. Which of these have you read? Which ones do you want to read? Did you like my wrap up? Did you not like my wrap up? What books did you read in February? Did you find any favorites? What are you reading this March? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, please like it and share it to spread the word. And if you like my content and would like to see more from me, don't forget to hit subscribe and click on the bell icon beside the subscribe button to get notified as and when I post new videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and add melodrama to your life.